After the alien princess mocked him, the human soldier silently removed his armor and left. The crystalline halls of the Zephyrian royal palace stretched high above Captain Marcus Chen's head. Beautiful blue light danced through the walls like water moving in slow motion. Everything here was designed to make visitors feel small. The aliens had built this place to show their power, and it worked. Marcus walked slowly behind Ambassador Sarah Martinez and the other human diplomats. His heavy boots made soft sounds on the smooth floor. The Zephyrians moved like dancers around them, their tall bodies flowing with each step. Their skin glowed with soft patterns of light that changed colors as they moved. "Remember, Captain," Ambassador Martinez whispered without looking back, "we need this peace treaty. Humanity cannot win this war through fighting alone." Marcus nodded but said nothing. He had seen enough battles in the past 3 years to know she was right. The Zephyrians had ships that could destroy entire planets. Their weapons could cut through human armor like paper. Their technology was hundreds of years ahead of anything Earth could build. But humans were still here, still fighting, still refusing to give up. The group entered the main council chamber. The room was massive, with walls that seemed to go up forever. Floating platforms held important Zephyrian officials. In the center of the room was a raised platform where Princess Lyrale waited. Marcus had seen pictures of the princess before, but seeing her in person was different. She was tall like all Zephyrians, maybe 8 feet high. Her skin was pale blue with silver patterns that moved across her arms and face. Her hair looked like flowing water mixed with starlight. She was beautiful in a way that hurt to look at, but her eyes were cold. "So," Princess Lyrale said, her voice like music mixed with ice, "these are the humans who think they can negotiate with the Zephyrian Empire." Her words came through a translator device, but Marcus could hear the disrespect in her tone even. Without understanding her language, Ambassador Martinez stepped forward and bowed slightly. "Your Highness, we come seeking peace between our peoples. The war has cost both sides too much already." The princess looked at each human diplomat, her glowing eyes judging them. When she saw Marcus, she stopped. Her expression changed to something that looked like disgust. "This primitive creature is your champion?" she asked the Zephyrian War Council members floating around the room. "Look at him wrapped in crude metal plating like some ancient barbarian." Marcus stood perfectly still. He had worn his best combat armor for this meeting. The dark metal plates covered his body from neck to feet. The helmet under his arm was polished and clean, but compared to the Zephyrians' flowing energy shields and light-based protection, his armor looked old and heavy. Princess Lyrale began walking around Marcus like a predator studying prey. "Your species still relies on such outdated protection?" she continued. "Metal plates hammered together like something from your dark ages?" The light patterns on her skin shifted to bright yellow and orange. Marcus's translator beeped softly, indicating these colors meant mockery and amusement in Zephyrian culture. "Perhaps we have overestimated humanity's worth as adversaries," the princess said, her voice getting louder. "If this is the best warrior you can send to represent your entire species, then maybe this war will end much sooner than we thought." The other human diplomats looked uncomfortable. Ambassador Martinez opened her mouth to speak, but Princess Lyrale held up one long, graceful hand. "No, please," the princess said with fake politeness. "Let me examine this example of human military might more closely." She moved closer to Marcus, studying his armor like it was something she might find in a museum. "Look at these dents and scratches, signs of actual physical combat. How quaint. When was the last time any of us had to worry about something actually touching our bodies during battle?" Some of the Zephyrian officials made sounds that Marcus's translator identified as laughter. "And the weight of it," Princess Lyrale continued. "This poor creature must carry dozens of pounds of metal everywhere he goes. No wonder humans move so slowly in battle. No wonder our ships can outrun yours so easily." Marcus felt his jaw tighten, but he kept his face blank. He had learned long ago not to show emotion when someone was trying to make him angry. The princess walked back to face him directly. "Tell me, human warrior, do you ever take off this primitive shell? Or are you so weak underneath that you would die without your metal skin?" The room fell silent. Even the other Zephyrians seemed surprised by how cruel their princess was being. Ambassador Martinez stepped forward again. Your Highness, Captain Chen is one of our finest soldiers. He has served with honor. Honor. Princess Lyrale laughed. The sound like breaking glass. Yes, I have read about human honor. How you throw away lives for meaningless concepts. How you refuse to surrender even when losing is certain. Very primitive thinking. Marcus looked into the princess's bright eyes. For a moment, something passed between them. She seemed to be waiting for him to speak, to defend himself, to show anger. Instead, Marcus set his helmet down on the smooth floor. The room went completely quiet. Without saying a word, Marcus began removing his armor. First the chest plate, setting it down carefully next to his helmet. Then the arm guards, the leg protection. Each piece placed with slow, deliberate movements. What is he doing? One of the Zephyrian officials whispered. The other human diplomats watched in shock. Ambassador Martinez looked like she wanted to stop him, but didn't know how. Marcus continued working. The back plate came off next, then the boots. Each piece of armor was set down with respect, like he was performing some kind of ceremony. Princess Lyrale watched with growing confusion. In Zephyrian culture, removing one's protection meant either complete surrender or preparation for ritual death. But Marcus didn't look defeated. He looked calm. When the last piece of armor was removed, Marcus stood in his simple black uniform. The clothing showed his real shape, smaller than the armor had made him look, but somehow more dangerous. Scars covered his arms and neck. Gray hair mixed with brown on his head. Lines around his eyes spoke of many years and many battles. Marcus looked directly at Princess Lyrale one last time. She found herself stepping back without meaning to. Without his armor, the human somehow seemed more threatening, not less. Then Marcus turned and walked toward the exit. Where are you going? Princess Lyrale called after him. We are not finished here. Marcus didn't answer. He didn't look back. He just walked out of the great hall, leaving his armor behind like a shed skin. The massive doors closed behind him with a sound like thunder. Princess Lyrale stared at the pile of human armor sitting on her floor. Around the room, Zephyrian officials whispered to each other in confusion. What just happened? She asked the remaining human diplomats. Ambassador Martinez looked at the armor, then at the closed doors. I honestly don't know, Your Highness. I honestly don't know. Ambassador Sarah Martinez stood in the human embassy's main communication room, staring at a screen that showed nothing but static. She had been trying to contact Captain Marcus Chen for 2 hours now. Every call went to empty space. Still nothing. Asked Dr. James Park, the expedition's science officer. His face showed the same worry that Martinez felt in her stomach. His communication device is still in the palace, Martinez said, rubbing her tired eyes. Along with everything else he was carrying, the Zephyrians gave us back his gear, but Marcus himself has completely disappeared. Through the large windows, they could see the alien capital city stretching into the distance. Tall towers of blue crystal reached toward the purple sky. Flying vehicles moved between the buildings like schools of fish. Everything looked peaceful and advanced. But Martinez knew that this beautiful place held the power to destroy every human world. The peace talks are falling apart, said Colonel Rebecca Stone, the military advisor. She held a data pad showing messages from the Zephyrian government. Princess Lyrale is telling everyone that Marcus's behavior proves humans can't be trusted. She says we're too unpredictable to make deals with. Martinez felt anger rising in her chest. 3 years of war had killed millions of people on both sides. These talks were humanity's best chance for survival. Now one man's strange behavior might ruin everything. What was he thinking? Dr. Park asked. Marcus is one of our most experienced officers. He's been in diplomatic situations before. Why would he just walk away? I don't know, Martinez admitted. But we need to find him before this gets worse. Across the city, in her private chambers high in the royal palace, Princess Lyrale was having her own meeting. The room was smaller than the Great Hall, but no less impressive. The walls showed moving pictures of distant galaxies. Soft music filled the air like a gentle breeze. Your Highness, said Admiral Kethes, the commander of the Zephyrian Space Fleet. Our intelligence services have been tracking the human delegation since the incident. All members are accounted for except the one called Marcus Chen. The princess turned away from a window that showed 3 moons rising over the horizon. Find him. I want to know where this primitive warrior went and why. We have already discovered his location, Admiral Kethys replied. He requisitioned a small atmospheric shuttle from the human embassy's transport bay. He departed the planet 6 hours ago. Princess Lyrale felt surprise wash through her. He left? Where did he go? According to flight records, his destination is the Kepler system, specifically Kepler 440b. The princess's glowing skin patterns shifted to dark blue, indicating deep thought. Every educated being in the galaxy knew about Kepler 440b. The planet was currently under siege by Zephyrian forces. 30,000 human colonists were trapped in underground bunkers, slowly running out of food and air. That makes no sense. She said, one human, alone, flying toward a planet we control? He'll be captured or destroyed before he gets close to the surface, unless that's what he wants. Admiral Kethys suggested, perhaps this is some form of human ritual suicide. Their species is known for such irrational behavior, but Princess Lyrale wasn't convinced. Something about the way Marcus had looked at her before leaving suggested he had a plan. She just couldn't understand what it might be. Far away, in the darkness between stars, Marcus Chen's small shuttle moved through space at maximum speed. The little ship wasn't built for long journeys, but it was fast and quiet. More importantly, it was small enough to avoid most detection systems. Marcus sat in the pilot's chair, studying star charts on his navigation screen. The journey to Kepler 440b would take 3 days. He had enough food and air for 5 days, with a little extra in case something went wrong. Behind him, the passenger area held supplies he had gathered from the embassy, basic medical equipment, emergency rations, and several containers of industrial chemicals that most people would consider junk. Marcus knew better. In the right hands, these simple materials could become powerful tools. He thought about the colonists trapped on Kepler 440b, men, women, and children who had left Earth to build new lives. Among the stars, they had volunteered to live on a dangerous frontier world because they believed in humanity's future. Now they were paying the price for a war they hadn't started. The Zephyrian siege fleet had surrounded the planet for 6 months. No ships could get through to deliver supplies or evacuate. Civilians, military command had written off the colonists as lost. Too much risk for too few lives, they said. Marcus disagreed. On Kepler 440b itself, the situation was getting desperate. Commander Lisa Rodriguez stood in the main bunker's command center, looking at charts that showed their remaining supplies. The numbers were not good. Food will last another 3 weeks, reported Sergeant Mike Torres. Water is better maybe 6 weeks if we're careful. But the air recycling system is starting to break down. Without replacement parts, we'll have problems in 2 weeks. Round them, 300 people lived in spaces meant for 50. Families crowded together in small rooms carved from rock. Children played quiet games to save air. Everyone moved slowly to conserve energy. Any word from Earth? Asked Dr. Emily Watson, the colony's chief medical officer. Commander Rodriguez shook her head. The last message was 4 days ago. Command says they're still working on a rescue plan. But she didn't finish the sentence. Everyone knew what it meant. Above them, Zephyrian ships patrolled the skies. The aliens had tried several times to force the humans to surrender, but the colonists refused. They had built their homes here. This was their world now, even if they died defending it. Back in the Zephyrian capital, the peace talks continued without Marcus. But Princess Lyrale found herself thinking about the human warrior. Instead of listening to the diplomats, the humans claim they want peace, she said to her advisors during a break. But their actions are contradictory. First they send their best soldier to represent them. Then he abandons the negotiations entirely. Perhaps this shows their true nature, suggested council member Zethus. They appear civilized, but underneath they are still wild animals. Princess Lyrale studied the pile of armor that still sat in the Great Hall. The metal plates, looked crude compared to Zephyrian technology, but they showed signs of heavy use. This wasn't ceremonial equipment. This was gear that had seen real combat. "Send a message to Admiral Kethes," she ordered. "I want detailed reports on what happens when the human reaches Kepler 440b. Something tells me this story isn't over." In the deep space monitoring stations throughout the galaxy, technicians noticed something strange. Energy signatures were moving toward the Kepler system, but they didn't match any known technology. The readings were too small to be ships, too organized to be natural phenomena. One technician on a remote station sent a report to his superiors. "Unknown contacts approaching contested zone. Recommend investigation." The message was filed with hundreds of others and forgotten. But in the darkness between worlds, something was moving toward Kepler 440b, something that would change everything. Marcus Chen's small shuttle drifted silently through the asteroid field surrounding Kepler 440b. Through his cockpit window, he could see the planet below, a brown and green world covered in thick, poisonous clouds. It looked peaceful from space. But Marcus knew better. Zephyrian siege ships floated in perfect formation around the planet like deadly flowers. Their hulls gleamed with blue energy shields. Weapon systems that could destroy cities tracked back and forth, searching for any ship brave enough to challenge them. Marcus had been watching the patrol patterns for 6 hours. The aliens were disciplined and precise. Every ship moved exactly where it was supposed to move, exactly when it was supposed to move. Their formation was beautiful and efficient. It was also predictable. Marcus checked his equipment one more time. He wore only a basic environmental suit-thin fabric that would keep him alive in the planet's toxic atmosphere, but offered no protection from weapons. In a small bag, he carried the industrial chemicals he had taken from the embassy, along with simple tools that any mechanic might use. No advanced technology, no weapons that would show up on alien scanners, no armor to slow him down or make noise. Just like the old days, he whispered to himself, remembering survival training in Earth's most dangerous places. Marcus launched his shuttle toward the planet in a controlled crash. To any watching sensors, it would look like debris from the asteroid field finally falling toward the surface. The little ship broke apart in the atmosphere exactly as planned, but not before Marcus ejected in an emergency pod. He landed hard in a swamp 20 miles from the main Zephyrian ground base. The thick mud and poisonous water would hide his heat signature from their sensors. More importantly, the harsh environment would keep alien patrols away. Zephyrians preferred clean, controlled spaces. They avoided places that were messy or dangerous. Humans had been born in messy, dangerous places. Marcus crawled out of the mud and began moving toward the enemy base. The planet's atmosphere burned his lungs even through the suit's filters. But he had trained in worse conditions. The heavy gravity pulled at his muscles. But he had worked in Earth's deep ocean trenches where pressure could crush submarines. Every step was difficult, but Marcus had learned long ago that difficult didn't mean impossible. At the Zephyrian ground installation, Commander Velter was reviewing the daily reports. The siege was going well. The human colonists were trapped underground with limited supplies. Soon they would have to surrender or die, sir, called Lieutenant Nexta from the communications station. "We detected a small debris impact in Sector 7, probably just asteroid fragments, but protocol requires investigation." Commander Velter made a sound of annoyance. "Send a drone to check, but don't waste too much time on it." The drone found the crash site, but detected nothing unusual, just pieces of metal scattered through a toxic swamp. The automated systems filed a standard report and moved on to other tasks. They never noticed the single human who had already disappeared into the wilderness. Marcus spent a day studying the Zephyrian base from a distance. The aliens had built their installation on high ground, away from the planet's dangerous swamps and acid rain. Clean, gleaming towers rose from a flat platform. Energy shields protected the entire complex from the hostile environment, but shields designed to keep out poison gas and acid rain weren't designed to keep out a single person. Who knew how to move without being seen? Marcus had learned stealth from the best teachers in the galaxy, Earth's predators. He moved like a hunting cat, Patient and quiet, he studied his prey like a snake, watching for the perfect moment to strike. He disappeared like a ghost when danger came too close. On the third night, he made his first move. The Zephyrian power plant was located outside the main shield, protected only by automated defenses. The aliens assumed that nothing could survive long enough in the toxic environment to threaten it. They were wrong. Marcus crawled through drainage pipes filled with acid water that would have killed most beings in minutes. His environmental suit held, and his human body endured what alien biology could not. He reached the power plant's maintenance access just as the automated patrol drones completed their cycle. Inside the plant, Marcus found exactly what he expected: beautiful, efficient alien technology that worked perfectly under normal conditions. But Marcus wasn't planning to create normal conditions from his bag of simple chemicals. He began mixing compounds that any human chemist would recognize. Acids that could eat through metal, compounds that became explosive when heated, simple. Materials that were harmless alone but deadly when combined properly. The first explosion was small, barely enough to damage one power relay, but it created a cascade effect through the alien system. The Zephyrians had built their technology to be efficient, which meant each part depended on every other part working perfectly. When one piece failed, others began failing too. Emergency lights flashed throughout the base as backup systems tried to compensate. Commander Velter rushed to the power station control room, his skin patterns shifting to colors that indicated stress and confusion. "What happened?" he demanded. "Unknown, sir," replied the chief engineer. "The main relay suffered catastrophic failure, but we can't determine the cause. There's no sign of enemy attack." By the time they discovered the sabotage, Marcus was already gone. He had slipped away through the same drainage pipes, leaving no trace except the damage behind him. Over the next 5 days, the attacks continued. Communication arrays failed when their cooling systems mysteriously developed leaks. Weapons platforms shut down when their targeting computers received signals that shouldn't exist. Transport ships couldn't launch because their fuel had been contaminated with compounds that made their engines unstable. Each attack was small and seemingly random, but together, they created chaos throughout the Zephyrian siege operation. "It's impossible," Commander Velter told his staff during an emergency meeting. "Our security systems detect no intrusion. Our patrols find no enemies. But our equipment keeps failing in ways that make no sense. Perhaps it's the environment," suggested the chief engineer. "This planet is more hostile than our models predicted." But Lieutenant Nexta had been studying the security recordings. "Sir, I found something strange. Look at this footage from Maintenance Tunnel 7. The screen showed a dark passage where acid water dripped from corroded pipes. For just a moment, something moved through the darkness, a shape that looked almost human, but moved in ways that seemed impossible. Enhance the image," Commander Velter ordered. But when they tried, the figure vanished into shadow and interference. Only a brief glimpse remained, something that might have been a person, moving through an environment that should have killed any living being in minutes. One of the human colonists asked the chief engineer. "Impossible," Commander Velter replied. "The colonists are trapped underground. Our sensors would detect anyone trying to leave their bunkers." But even as he said it, doubt crept into his mind. The humans had surprised them before during this war. Their ships were slower and their weapons weaker, but they kept fighting when any logical species would surrender. They survived in conditions that should have killed them. They found ways to win battles they should have lost. Maybe the Zephyrians had been thinking about humans wrong from the beginning. "Double all patrols," he ordered, "and send a message to Admiral Kethys. Tell him we may have a problem down here." Deep in the toxic swamps, Marcus cleaned his equipment and planned his next move. The sabotage campaign was working, but it wasn't enough. The Zephyrians would adapt soon, just like he was adapting to their defenses. But Marcus had one more target in mind, the biggest, most dangerous target of all. He looked up at the stars, where the Zephyrian command ship waited in orbit. Soon, very soon, he would pay them a visit they would never forget. Admiral Kethys stood on the bridge of his flagship, the celestial harmony. Watching displays that showed chaos spreading through his perfect siege operation. Red warning lights flashed across dozens of screens. His ground forces were reporting equipment failures every hour. His orbital platforms were operating at 60% efficiency. "How many ships have we lost to this saboteur?" he asked his tactical officer. "None destroyed, sir," Lieutenant Commander Fyth replied. "But 12 vessels have suffered critical system failures. The Morning Star lost all navigation systems. The Silver Wing can't fire its main weapons. The Crystal Blade is stuck in orbit because its engines won't respond to commands." Admiral Kethys felt his skin patterns shift to dark purple, indicating deep frustration. In 300 years of military service, he had never encountered an enemy like this. The human wasn't fighting like a soldier. He was fighting like a virus, infecting their systems from within. "And we still have no visual confirmation of the intruder?" "Negative, sir. Our security recordings show shadows and interference, but nothing clear enough to analyze." Down on the planet's surface, Marcus was making his final preparations. He stood at the edge of a massive crater where an old mining operation had left deep tunnels, leading toward the planet's core. The Zephyrians had sealed these tunnels when they took control of the planet, but they had underestimated human engineering. Marcus had spent the last 2 days reopening the deepest shaft. The work was dangerous. Poisonous gases leaked from the rocks, and the tunnel could collapse at any moment. But it led exactly where he needed to go, directly under the main Zephyrian communications array. He placed his final set of improvised explosives deep in the tunnel, then began the dangerous climb back to the surface. The charges were timed to detonate in sequence, creating a chain reaction that would destroy the entire communications network. When the explosions began, the effect was more dramatic than even Marcus had expected. The ground shook like an earthquake. Towers of crystal and metal collapsed into the crater. Energy discharges lit up the sky like lightning. Most importantly, the communications blackout created a gap in the orbital defense grid. Marcus activated his emergency beacon, a simple radio transmitter that broadcast on old human military frequencies. The message was short: package delivered, window opening, time to go. In the underground bunkers, Commander Lisa Rodriguez heard the transmission through their emergency communications equipment. She couldn't believe what she was hearing. "Is that Captain Chen?" asked Sergeant Torres. "How is he even alive out there?" "I don't know," Rodriguez replied. "But if he's created an opening, we need to be ready to move." Above them, the Zephyrian fleet was scrambling to respond to the communications failure. Ships moved out of formation as commanders tried to coordinate. Without their central command network, for the first time in months, there were gaps in their perfect blockade. That's when the human ships arrived. They came from the direction of the nearest star, using its radiation to hide their approach until the last moment. But these weren't military vessels. They were civilian transports, cargo haulers, even personal spacecraft. Ships that had no business being in a war zone. Admiral Kethys watched in amazement as dozens of human vessels approached his fleet. "What are they doing?" he asked his tactical officer. "Those ships are unarmed. We could destroy them all in minutes, sir. We're receiving a transmission from the lead vessel. Put it through." The face that appeared on the main screen belonged to a middle-aged woman with graying hair and determined eyes. "This is Captain Sarah Kim of the civilian transport New Hope. We're here to evacuate the colonists from Kepler 440b. Admiral Kethys activated his own transmitter. "Captain Kim, you are entering a restricted military zone. Turn back immediately or face destruction." Captain Kim's expression didn't change. "Admiral, we're not here to fight you. We're here to save our people. Nothing you do will stop us from trying. You cannot succeed." Admiral Kethys replied, "Our blockade is absolute. Your blockade has holes in it now," Captain Kim said simply, "thanks to one very brave soldier." As if summoned by her words, more explosions erupted across the Zephyrian formation. Marcus had somehow reached the flagship's external sensor array. Critical systems began failing throughout the fleet. Admiral Kethys felt something he hadn't experienced in centuries: uncertainty. "All ships, maintain formation. Do not let the civilian vessels through. But maintaining formation was becoming impossible. The sabotage had created a chain reaction of system failures. Ships that couldn't communicate properly began making mistakes. Vessels that couldn't see clearly started firing at shadows. In the confusion, the human civilian ships slipped through the gaps. Like water flowing around rocks. Captain Kim's voice came through the radio again. All transports begin landing operations. We have maybe 30 minutes before they reorganize. On the planet's surface, Commander Rodriguez felt hope for the first time in months. All units, prepare for evacuation. Priority to families with children, then wounded, then essential personnel. The evacuation began with military precision despite the chaos. Human colonists emerged from their underground shelters for the first time in half a year. Children who had lived in darkness saw sunlight through the planet's toxic clouds. Families separated by the siege were reunited as transport ships landed in the few safe zones Marcus had cleared. But Marcus himself was nowhere to be seen. Admiral Kethes was in his private command center, trying to coordinate the response, when his security systems detected an impossible breach. Someone was aboard his flagship. Impossible. He said aloud, "Nothing could penetrate our shields." But the internal sensors confirmed it. There was definitely an intruder on board, moving through the ship's maintenance areas like a ghost. Admiral Kethes activated his personal guard and went hunting. He found Marcus in the ship's main engine room, calmly placing charges on critical systems. The human looked smaller, without his armor, but somehow more dangerous. His movements were precise and confident, like someone who had done this many times before. "Stop," Admiral Kethes commanded, his weapon pointed at Marcus. "You are under arrest." Marcus turned slowly, his hands visible and empty. "Admiral Kethes, I presume. You're taller than I expected. How did you get aboard my ship?" Marcus smiled slightly. "I swam through space, through your waste disposal system, actually. Your ship processes a lot of organic waste, and the disposal chutes lead directly to the processing center. No shields, no sensors, just a very unpleasant trip through. About a mile of alien sewage." Admiral Kethes felt disgust wash through him. Impossible. Nothing could survive that journey. Humans have been crawling through sewers to attack enemies for thousands of years, Marcus replied. "It's not pleasant, but it works. Your mission has failed," the Admiral said. "We will adapt to your tactics. We will close the gaps in our formation. Your people will not escape." Marcus looked at the Admiral with something that might have been pity. "You still don't understand, do you? This was never about tactics or formations or superior technology. Then, what was it about?" "Determination," Marcus said simply. "You fight like your machines efficiently, logically, but without adaptation. Humans learn to survive by being unpredictable, by refusing to quit even when losing is certain." As if to prove his point, new explosions echoed through the ship. The charges Marcus had placed were activating in sequence, disabling the flagship's main weapons and propulsion systems. "Rest me if you want," Marcus continued, "but look at your screens. Look at what's happening out there." Admiral Kethes glanced at a nearby display and felt his certainty crumble. The human civilian ships were successfully loading colonists, despite everything the Zephyrian fleet was doing to stop them. More ships were arriving every hour, not military vessels, but ordinary people who had heard about the evacuation and decided to help. "Why?" Admiral Kethes asked. "Why would civilians risk their lives for people they don't even know?" Marcus smiled. "Because they're human. And because one soldier removing his armor in an alien palace somehow became a symbol that we don't have to fight the way you expect us to." Through the bridge speakers, Captain Kim's voice could be heard coordinating the evacuation. "Transport 7. You have clearance for departure. Transport 8. Begin loading wounded personnel. All ships, maintain formation and watch for gaps in their coverage." Admiral Kethes realized with growing amazement that the humans were treating his powerful fleet like a navigation hazard rather than a deadly enemy. They weren't trying to fight the Zephyrians. They were simply flowing around them like water around stones. "Your princess was right about one thing," Marcus said quietly. "Humans are unpredictable. We don't follow the logical rules of warfare. Sometimes that makes us weak, but sometimes. Another explosion shook the flagship as Marcus's final charges activated. Sometimes it makes us impossible to stop. The evacuation of Kepler 440b was complete. 30,000 human colonists had been lifted from their underground shelters and carried to safety by civilian ships that had no business being in a war zone. The operation had taken 18 hours and cost the Zephyrian fleet 6 major vessels damaged, dozens of systems compromised, and their reputation for invincibility. But Marcus Chen was now in chains. He sat in a detention cell aboard Admiral Kethys' flagship, looking through a small window at the stars. His mission was accomplished. The colonists were safe. Now he would pay the price for his actions. The cell door opened with a soft sound. Marcus expected to see guards, but instead Princess Lyrale walked in. She looked different, somehow smaller, less sure of herself. The arrogant confidence from their first meeting was gone. "Captain Chen," she said, taking a seat across from him. "Or should I call you the Phantom of Kepler?" Marcus almost smiled. "That's what they're calling me? My intelligence officers don't know what else to call someone who moves through impossible places and appears where he shouldn't exist." She studied his face carefully. "Tell me something. When you removed your armor in my palace, was that planned?" "No," Marcus replied honestly. "I was angry. You were right about some things. My armor was primitive compared to your technology. But you missed the point entirely, which was..." Marcus leaned back in his chair. "The armor wasn't just protection. It was also a limitation. It made me fight like your soldiers, relying on technology instead of adaptability. Sometimes you have to remove what protects you to become who you need to be." Princess Lyrale was quiet for a long moment. Outside the window, human ships were jumping to hyperspace, carrying the rescued colonists to safety. Each departure was a small reminder of how completely her forces had been outmaneuvered. 18 civilian ships, she said finally, cargo, haulers, passenger transports, even personal yachts. None of them were military vessels. None of them were properly armed, but they succeeded where your best warships had failed. Because they weren't trying to fight you, Marcus explained. They were just trying to save lives. Different goal, different approach. The pilots we captured all tell the same story. The princess continued. They heard about your solo mission through unofficial channels, social networks, news broadcasts, personal messages. Within hours, volunteers from across human space were organizing rescue fleets. Marcus felt a warmth in his chest. He had hoped his actions might inspire others, but he hadn't expected anything this dramatic. Princess Lyrale stood and began walking around the small cell. "Do you know what disturbs me most about this entire incident? It wasn't your sabotage tactics or your infiltration skills. It was the spontaneous cooperation. Thousands of humans risking their lives for people they had never met, following the example of one soldier who was mocked in my throne room. Humans do that," Marcus said simply. "We help each other. But why? What's the logical benefit? What do they gain?" Marcus considered how to explain something that seemed obvious to him, but apparently wasn't obvious to aliens. There doesn't have to be a logical benefit. Sometimes people do things because they're right, not because they're profitable. The princess stopped walking and stared at him. "Your entire species operates on principles rather than logic." "Not entirely. But when it matters most, yes." Through the cell's communication system, a voice announced that Admiral Kethys was requesting the princess's presence on the bridge. She stood to leave, then paused at the door. "Your armor is still in my palace," she said. "Exactly where you left it. My technicians have been studying it. Find anything interesting?" "It's not primitive at all," she admitted. "The design is actually quite sophisticated, simple, but effective, built to be repaired in the field with basic tools, built to last for decades with proper maintenance, built by people who understood that fancy technology fails when you need it most." She left Marcus alone with his thoughts. On the bridge of the Celestial Harmony, Admiral Kethys was dealing with reports from across the fleet. The damage from Marcus's sabotage was extensive, but not permanent. More importantly, the psychological impact was enormous. "Sir," reported his tactical officer, We're receiving communication requests from the human embassy. Ambassador Martinez is requesting immediate peace negotiations. Under what terms? Admiral Kethys asked. Complete withdrawal of Zephyrian forces from the Kepler system. Establishment of neutral zones around all human colonies. And formal recognition of human territorial claims. Admiral Kethys felt his skin patterns shift to colors indicating surprise. Those are the terms of a victorious power, not a defeated one. Yes, sir. But considering recent events, the Admiral understood. The successful evacuation had changed everything. The humans hadn't just rescued their people, they had proven that Zephyrian military superiority meant nothing against human unpredictability and determination. Princess Lyrale returned to the bridge and listened to the reports in silence. Finally, she spoke, opened a channel to the human embassy. Ambassador Martinez appeared. On the main screen, looking tired but determined, Your Highness. I trust Captain Chen is being treated well. He is unharmed, Princess Lyrale replied. Ambassador, I want to understand something. This rescue operation, it wasn't planned by your military, was it? No, Martinez admitted. It was completely spontaneous. Civilian volunteers heard about Captain Chen's mission and decided to help. My government had no control over it. So your people regularly ignore their government's orders? Martinez smiled slightly. Your Highness, humans have a saying. It's easier to ask forgiveness than permission. When something needs to be done, we tend to do it first and worry about rules later. Princess Lyrale exchanged glances with Admiral Kethys. This was exactly what they had feared, an enemy that couldn't be predicted or controlled through normal diplomatic channels. We accept your terms, Princess Lyrale said suddenly. The bridge fell silent. Admiral Kethys stared at his princess in shock. Your Highness? We accept the human terms for peace, she repeated. With one addition, Captain Chen will be returned to your embassy immediately, along with his equipment. 3 days later, Marcus stood once again in the crystalline halls of the Zephyrian Royal Palace, but this time, he wasn't wearing his armor. He carried it instead, cleaned and polished, in a simple transport case. Princess Lyrale waited for him in a smaller chamber, not the great throne room where they had first met. The space felt more personal, more honest. Your armor, she said, gesturing to the case. You brought it back. I thought you might want to keep it, Marcus replied. As a reminder. A reminder of what? That sometimes the most important strength comes from being willing to give up. What makes you feel strong? Princess Lyrale accepted the case with both hands. My advisors have been analyzing your species since the evacuation. They've identified what they call the human factor, your tendency to succeed through cooperation and adaptability rather than technological superiority. Sounds about right. They recommend that we never fight humans again, not because we can't win, but because victory would require us to become unpredictable ourselves, and unpredictability, they say, is incompatible with our social structure. Marcus nodded. We're different species. We think differently, fight differently, live differently. That doesn't have to make us enemies. No, Princess Lyrale agreed. It doesn't. She placed the armor case on a pedestal where it would be visible to anyone entering the chamber. I'm making this a permanent display, a reminder to my people. That strength comes in many forms. Marcus looked at his old armor one last time. It seemed smaller now, less important. What will you call the display? Princess Lyrale thought for a moment. The armor of understanding. A memorial to the day we learned that removing your protection can be the most protective thing you can do. As Marcus walked out of the palace for the second time, he felt lighter without his armor, but somehow more complete. Behind him, Princess Lyrale stood looking at the simple metal plates that had changed the course of galactic history. In the years that followed, the peace between humans and Zephyrians would become legendary, not because it ended a war, but because it began with one soldier's quiet decision to show strength through vulnerability. The armor still sits in the Zephyrian Royal Palace, visited by millions of beings from across the galaxy. The placard beside it reads, "Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is remove what protects you." And in the stars beyond, human ships continue to move through the galaxy not as conquerors, but as helpers, carrying the lesson Marcus taught. That true strength comes not from the armor we wear, but from the willingness to take it off when doing so might save lives.